What is going on, guys? It is Jono, and in today's video, we are going to be walking through make.com from literally A to Z, everything you need to know about this software. And I'm not gonna break this up into a multi-part series. I'm literally gonna go through every single freaking point that you're going to need to know to go from not knowing anything about make.com all the way up to becoming pretty much professional. Just to give you some perspective on what make.com does, I wanna share my screen. So this is the software that we're gonna be using. And if I just come over to a couple of use cases, this is the kind of stuff that I get to do with make.com. So one thing is that my company, we do about $1 million plus in sales every single year. And we're super sales heavy, which means that we send out like 10, 15 of these every single day, these contracts and invoices. Now, you can see how many different custom variables there are in here. This is just like a sample one for now, but there's about like 150 different custom fields here. And all of these are 100% automated. Our sales team doesn't enter in any of this stuff. Essentially, they get off a phone call, they fill out a form on our website, and then as soon as that form's submitted, this automatically gets generated for them. And this is completely through make.com. Another thing that we like to do is track in real time our analytics. So I could go to any date range that I want, and I can gather data on our entire team's performance, our marketing performance, our ad campaigns, things like cities, sources for leads, types of events we're doing, all the things to do with our sales reps and conversion rates. Everything is tracked in real time thanks to make.com. Lastly, we're able to generate blog posts using AI and spit them out super fast and have them be super high quality. With blog posts like this, I do have our writers take a final look at it just before publishing it live because I believe in human intervention. But these are just some of the things that you can do using make.com. So what is make.com? Well, essentially, it's an automation platform, and it connects in tens of thousands of applications together to allow you to be able to automate all of these tasks you're currently doing by hand. Now, if you come into Google, right, and you type in make.com Academy, you're gonna actually land on make.com's personal academy that lets you go through their whole training modules from A to Z and learn everything. Now, you could do this, you can spend a ton of time doing this. It's probably gonna take you hours and hours and hours, but in this video, I'm literally gonna cover pretty much every frickin' step in this entire training in a video format is incredibly quickly and give you real life examples that you can apply directly to your business pretty much, well, today. So what are these examples? We have 3 examples we're gonna build out. So I am gonna assume that most of you guys out there, if you're using make.com, you probably have a business of some variety, right? And in your business, maybe you need to generate leads. And we're gonna be building out a system to allow you to automatically send those leads from your form, wherever they're filling it out, like on your website, all the way into your CRM, and also to Slack and email yourself. And the reason why that's actually important, by the way, and this isn't my stat, I didn't come up with this at all. This is just something you can find pretty easily online. But if you call somebody within 60 seconds, you can increase your conversion rate by 391%. So an automation like this will allow you, it's very simple to build out, but it'll allow you to increase your sales by 4-fold. So imagine you just not having to work for like that hard, and you can close 4 times more sales just by calling faster. So an automation like this is gonna allow you to do that because as soon as a freaking lead comes in, you're gonna be notified. You're gonna be on that call immediately, and you can reach out and sell your services or the products that you have. So this is the first workflow we're going to be building out today. Now, the second workflow that we're going to be building out is going to be giving you a summary or a recap of all of the missed calls that you didn't have in that day. So if leads are coming through and you or your sales team are not calling these people, then we're going to send an automated report to you so that you can see who still needs to be called. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how we can integrate make.com into tens of thousands of other applications. Now, what I would recommend here, guys, is to download these blueprints in the description. They're gonna be for free. Pause this video, download them, and then import them into your make.com account. You can hit these 3 dots here, like the more section, and then import these blueprints in. And the reason why I say that is because I would love it if you guys just followed through this this with me step by step, because the best way to learn is not just to passively watch, but actively engage in building these workflows together, because I chose these workflows for a reason. Actually, 3 reasons to be exact. Reason number 1 is that most people watching this are probably actually going to benefit from these workflows. Number 2 is that all of the applications that I'm choosing here, they're all free, with the exception of maybe one application, and I'll point it out, that might be paid, but technically you can do it for free. It's just a bit more complicated, but that's a big point, right? I want the barrier to entry for anyone to be watching this video to be 0. Like, you don't have to pay anything. You can get free trials or just have free accounts, and you can actually gain real life value from this video. And then point number 3 is that I wanted to build out workflows that actually cover every single frickin' thing you really actually need to know. Not like the fluff, not the BS, not the stuff that doesn't matter, the stuff that's flashy, that isn't gonna matter when you actually get into make.com, the things that you are actually gonna be using all the frickin' time. If that sounds like something you guys are interested in, we're gonna be building this out right away. Just before we begin, please make sure to subscribe to this channel if you're new, because I'm gonna be releasing videos just like this, allowing you guys to find ways to automate your business, your life, all that kind of stuff. So if you like this video, I'm sure you're gonna like the other ones. Also, make sure to use my make.com affiliate link down below, because I will send you an email containing my top 10 favorite blueprints that I use for my business pretty much on a daily basis. I'm sure you're gonna find some value out of that. And lastly, guys, once we go through this, you can check out my channel. I have so many make.com scenarios. Everything that most of the things you're probably gonna wanna build are all gonna be there. All you have to do is find the right videos, watch them. There's free blueprints in every single link. Okay, so with that being said, I've talked too much. Let's get started right now. Okay, so the first thing we're actually gonna do here is we're just gonna go ahead and create an account in make.com. Now, before we do that, I wanna go over the pricing really quickly here, just so you guys can get a good idea of what this looks like. So they have a free plan. Make.com has a free plan, and it's free forever. You get 1,000 operations every single month. This is gonna allow you to save a bit of time, right? I would estimate that a lot of these automations could save you like up to 2 minutes per time. It's hard to put a rough estimate at that, but like some will be like a second, others will be like 5 minutes, and I would just say the estimate's 2 minutes. So this is a lot of time saved by paying absolutely no money whatsoever. However, I would recommend going up to the core plan, which is $9 every single month, just because you're gonna be able to get way more. Okay, that was super distracting there. Thank you, make.com. You're gonna get way more operations here. And yeah, so when you're ready, you can upgrade into the paid plan. So let's go ahead and we're gonna create a free account for make.com. And we'll go ahead and add in our information, and then we will get into the actual make.com interface. So I'm just gonna go ahead and register my accounts here, and then we should be good to go. And we'll copy this link address, paste it back in, and we're good to go. We can just log in to make.com. Okay, awesome. First thing it's going to do is it's going to ask you for a ton of different questions, and I like to absolutely give no real answers here because I don't like answering these things. So we're just going to skip over that completely, and now we're in the user interface. Now, the beautiful thing about the make.com user interface is that you absolutely need to know almost nothing in here except for one thing, and that is the scenarios tab. So I'm actually going to go back into my account here and show you guys what this looks like. So team, you're probably never going to use this, but you can add people into your account if you have other team members that need to access it. Templates, these are like boilerplate things that you can build in make.com. These are like some of their recommended modules, but to be honest, I've never used this in my entire life. Don't recommend using this. I just build things that are applicable to your business. Connections are all the applications that you currently have integrated into make.com. Webhooks are essentially kind of like applications, right? So in make.com, you can connect in tons of different things like Google Drive or like ClickUp or like Slack or like Twitter or Tumblr or Pinterest, right? But there's also tens of thousands of applications that you can't natively integrate into Make.com because they don't have like a built-in integration yet. But that doesn't mean that you can't connect them into Make.com. You just have to use something called a webhook. And for now, I'm going to leave it at that because we're actually going to be coming back and I'm going to be going into this in quite a bit of depth. And lastly, keys, devices, data stores, data structures, custom apps. I'm not even going to go into this. I've never used pretty much any of these before. And also Resource Hub, what's new, notifications, help, and even the profile. I'm also not going to get into any of that either because all of that's pretty much fluff. It doesn't really matter. The only real reason you're using Make.com is for the scenarios tab right here. Lastly, in the organizational tab, you can add people to a team or select or add users. You can modify your subscription, make payments, all of that kind of stuff. That's pretty much it. So we're going to move into the scenarios tab now and focus on what actually matters in Make.com. So in the scenarios tab, you can create these scenarios to automate. This is kind of what a scenario would look like. And this is going to be the first automated scenario that we're going to be building out, right? Now you can have folders here. So for example, you could be like, hey, I want to create a test folder. And then within the test folder, you can create a scenario in there. This is just going to allow you to stay organized. So we'll go ahead and do this. And you're going to be confronted by the largest purple plus sign you've ever seen in your entire freaking life, right? So, so there you go. I mean, essentially, before we even build anything out, I kind of just want to talk about this particular user interface here. Okay, so the first thing is you can name your scenarios up top here. So we could do like test scenario number 1. And also, what we could do as well is we could run once. Now, I think my face is actually blocking this, so I'm going to zoom in here. But we have this run once. Oh my gosh, it's not working very well with me. So we have this run once module right here. And my face still might be blocking a bit of it. But essentially, this puts your Make.com account into a test mode where essentially you can see in real time the data come in so that we can see the results, right? We're going to get more into this later on, but this run once is just for testing. And then once you're happy with the scenario, then you can set it live, right? And how you'd set it live is just by essentially coming out and then turning the scenario on right here, okay? And also coming back in here, we can schedule certain things, right? You'll see that it doesn't allow you to schedule something when a scenario is empty. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to throw in like a basic trigger. Anything, it doesn't matter what you click here. Literally, you could add in any single freaking thing, but tools is probably going to be the easiest. So I'll just come in here and write tools, and then you could come in and set basic trigger, right? And then once we have that, we can open this module up. Now, when you're dealing with scheduling in Make.com, you can assign certain intervals for automated scenarios to run. Now, the most common thing is, I would say 95% of the time, I never touch this. Probably even more, maybe like 99% of the time. And the reason why is because Make.com typically runs in real time. So what that means is that data is coming from some other source into Make.com, and then you're doing something with it. So coming back to this original scenario, we have a form that's set up in Make.com. When somebody fills out that form, then we want to add that information into Google Sheets. We don't want to schedule it so that every 15 minutes it checks. We want to make sure that as soon as that data has been sent, or as soon as that form has been submitted, then we send data into Google Sheets, right? So this is only in the off chance that you want things to run at certain intervals. So maybe you want to send yourself a daily reminder every single day. You could come in here and be like, once every day or every day at this time, I want to send myself a reminder. Okay, and you can go, so moving on, you can save a scenario down here, or you can hit Command or Control S to save it automatically. And then you have scenario settings here. This stuff I usually don't really touch, and we're going to get a bit further into this later on, but this I pretty much always leave default except for this allow storing of incomplete executions, and we're actually going to circle back to this at a later point in time and talk about it. And then you can create notes for the specific scenario. You can revert back to past versions, and then you can also auto align a scenario. So let's say that this is kind of crazy out of line here, you can auto align it and it's going to bring it back into the frame perfectly. You can import and export workflows. Explain workflow will explain how the workflow is working, but let's be real, like you're probably never going to use that. I've never used that in my life. And then here's some quick things that you can add in that are common or very popular in Make.com. And we're going to be going over all of these, and then you can add in modules. Okay, so that's pretty much the user interface. With this add modules, it's the same thing as clicking this plus button, and you have access to adding additional modules in. Now, just one last thing, when you come back here, you can see any past runs of the scenario here. So circling back to this pre-built workflow here, you can actually see the history, right? When it was edited, certain runs, you could see the history here and see if it failed or succeeded or all that kind of stuff in the history tab. And then lastly, we have incomplete executions, where if it failed, right? So if this wasn't a success, then you can actually see the logs of any incomplete executions. And when I mean logs, I just mean like a table like this, where you see all of the different instances, and this would be like one instance on November 6th at this time it failed, and here's the reason why, and you can look into it, right? So that's essentially it in a nutshell. So now that we've covered the user interface of Make.com, let's go ahead and let's build our first scenario where we're essentially allowing ourselves to have leads from a form be automatically added into a Google Sheet, right? So we're going to have leads entered into a Google Sheet, and then we're going to do some other modifications, like sending ourselves an email, a Slack message, and entering them into our CRM. This is up to taste, depending on what you guys want, but this is what we're going to be building out. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this module, and I'm going to add a new module in here. Right now, the thing about this is that there is tons of different options that you can choose from. If I just scroll down, my hand would have like carpal tunnel by the end of the day, because like there's just so many options, right? But anyways, there's a lot of things you can do here. You can integrate in pretty much all of your favorite applications, which makes it so cool. But because we're capturing leads in a form, what I want to do is I want to use something called Google Forms, just because this is free to get started. And as long as you have a Google account, you can go ahead and you can access this module without paying a frickin' dime. So in Google Forms, right, so we've selected a particular module, which is Google Forms. We could have selected anything there, but within Google Forms, there's a lot of different actions that we can take, right? And usually when it comes to actions like this, there's a certain amount of things that you can do. So just to visualize this, I'm going to make it easier and go into Google Sheets here. Now in Google Sheets, this is a good representation of the typical functionality that you'll have in these modules, but you can add, you can update, you can delete, and you can search, right? So those are the four most common things that you'll probably want to do: is add, update, search, and delete. And all of those are possible here. This is actually the most popular module in all of Make.com, Google Sheets, and this is what we're going to be using. But another really popular thing is watching for responses. So in Make.com, we're going to come back here. We're going to select Forms, okay? And in Google Forms, we're going to select the watch responses here. And if you read this, it says triggers when a new response is received. Well, what does trigger mean? Well, what happens in Make.com is that there's two components to it. You have triggers and you have actions. There's only one trigger, and then there can be as many actions as possible. A trigger is fancy for saying what actually starts the workflow, and then actions are afterwards. So the trigger is, hey, somebody actually submitted that form. An action could be, hey, let's add this person into a Google Sheet. Let's email ourselves about that person that just inquired. Let's send ourselves a Slack message, because maybe we want to double down on the notifications in case we're logged out of our Gmail or whatever. And then let's also add this person to like a CRM, right? So that is essentially the difference. You have a trigger, one trigger, it starts the workflow, and then you can have as many actions as you want. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set up our first module here, which is the Google Forms watch responses. Now, before we can do any changes here, we actually have to create a connection between this form module and Google Forms. So we can create this connection here, and I'm going to title this make.com Google Forms connection. Okay. And then it's going to ask you to sign in with your Google account. And because I'm already signed in, I will have my account appear here. I just need to select the right account and then continue. And it's just essentially what we're doing is we're giving make.com permission to do things with Google Forms. Specifically, we're giving permission to make.com to watch for submissions in any of our form responses. We're also going to be giving permission for make.com to do things in all the apps that we're going to be using, because make.com will not be able to do anything unless you give it permission to do things. So in Google Sheets, maybe you want to add a row or delete a row or update a row. You need to give it permission to be able to do that on your behalf automatically. So we're going to come in here and allow make.com to access our applications, and then it's going to return us back into make.com, and we have officially selected, or we've officially done our first integration into another application. Congratulations, that's a big step. So now we're stuck with two required fields here, which is the form ID, and then we have the limit. So let's go ahead and let's do this. So before I fill this out, what this is essentially asking is, hey, we need to know what form you actually want us to watch. But the problem is, well, we haven't created a form yet. So we have to go ahead and do that. So we can head over to forms.google.com, and then we can simply create a form here. And we're going to start from scratch. Now, I don't use Google Forms personally, and a lot of you watching this probably won't use Google Forms. The reason I'm using Google Forms is because it's free and the barrier to entry is nothing, so anyone can use this. So I'm going to go ahead and call this make.com test form. And we're just going to add some basic questions like first name, and then we'll go ahead and create another question, last name, and then we'll add email in here. We're going to add a couple more questions because I want to get to know a bit more about any person that inquires with their business, such as their budget. And I'm going to have this be a drop-down option. So option number 1 is going to be less than $100. Option number 2 is going to be $100 to $1,000. And then option number 3, let's just say it's $1,000 plus dollars. So these are the 3 options for people inquiring. It's like, hey, tell me your budget. Can you spend less than $100? Can you spend between 100 and 1,000, or 1,000 plus? And the last thing that I want to do here is just have a message. And we're going to ask the person, please, let's pretend we're a digital marketing agency. Please provide us with a link to your website so we can view it. Okay. So these are the questions that we want to ask. We'll go ahead and we'll send this by clicking this massive send button here. And then we're going to get the link format, and we're just going to copy this into a new tab, and we're going to fill out a response here. So I'm going to type in all of my details, and we'll say for the budget, maybe it's like 1,000 plus. And then I'm going to say, here's my site, google.com. And I'm going to submit it. Okay, so we've submitted the form. Now coming back into make.com, we should be able to access this form, okay? And how we access it is, first of all, we need the form ID. So coming back into the builder here, in the URL, there is this form ID here. This is the ID of the form after the d/ and before the /edit. This random like 20-digit code is going to be the unique identifier to your account and to this form in your account. We can go ahead and paste that ID in here. We're going to set the limit to 1. What this limit means is like how many results do you want to pull in a given time? Because this is an instant thing. I want to pull in 1 result at a given time. We'll click OK. And we can essentially click all for now, because remember, we've already submitted this form once. So there is a submission in the queue. We'll click OK, and we should run this and we'll get a response, hopefully. Okay, sweet. So here's the output we have generated. Okay, so first things first is that you'll know you have a response based on this like little cloud thing at the top right corner here, right? At least that's how I like to think about it, as like a thinking cloud, right? And like cartoons and anime and that kind of stuff. But when you click on this, you're gonna see an output here. And this is the way data is structured in make.com. This is called JSON data. We are going to go into this later on, but for the purposes of right now, there's key value pairs, okay? So the key would be response ID. The value is the ID of that response, right? The key is when was this created, and it would be November 6th. If I resubmitted this, it wouldn't be 651, it might be 652 or 653 or 654. So the value always changes, but the key is how we reference the information. That never changes, okay? So essentially, if we click in answers here, we can see all of the answers that I just filled out here. So if I go into fill first name, text answers, and then 1, you can see the value equals Jono. If I was to fill this out again and put, for example, Richard as the first name, then the next time I submit this, it would say value equals Richard, okay? And same kind of deal with the last name. If I drill down, and trust me, you don't have to drill that down this much with most applications in make.com. This is just something native to Google Forms. So anyways, don't worry about that. But the next value here is my last name, right? And if I put in Anderson here, for example, then the next time I submit this, it would be Anderson, right? Same thing with the email. We have all of the values that we just submitted here, which is great. Now, what we want to do is we essentially want to dump this data into a Google Sheet. Now, you could just link this to a Google Sheet in Google Forms, but this is quite limiting because we actually want to modify the information in real time in make.com. Like I could just dump it in here, but I want to modify it, manipulate it, change it on the fly depending on certain responses. So I'm not going to use this. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to add another module here, and this module will be a Google Sheet, and we're going to add a row. Okay, sweet. So we have the first thing we need to do is connect in our account again, and we can essentially click on the first pop-up here, because this is what we've already connected in the past. And the reason why this appears is because Google Forms and Google Sheets, you have one centralized account for both. You've given make.com permission to Google Forms, but you also have to update the scopes so that it has permission, and scopes just means like the permission level that it has, so that it can also modify Google Sheets as well as Google Forms. So we'll go ahead and update the connection permissions here, click continue. It's going to push us over to make.com, into Google Sheets here again. I'm going to sign in one more time, and I'm going to connect in my account, give it the modified permissions to see, edit, create, delete all of my Google Drive files and my Google Sheets spreadsheets as well. We'll click allow and return back. And now we've connected in our second application here, and we're going to work on this. But just before we do, I have a particular Google Sheet here, and I'm going to rebuild this from the ground up. So we'll go into sheets.google.com. sheets.google.com. And we're going to create a Google spreadsheet here. So I'm going to click the blank spreadsheet, and we'll start from the beginning. And I'm going to call this testmake.com leads. Okay, I've pasted in the values here as the header of the information I want to collect. So I want to collect first name, last name, email, message, website, budget, and then I want to know if somebody's been rejected, if I contacted them, and when they actually initially inquired, right? And you can see we collected the fields for these, and also the budget, but we didn't collect it for website, rejected, contacted, and initially contacted, right? But we're still going to fill this in using make.com. So circling back here, what we need to do is, first of all, we need to link up this connection with the sheet. So the search method, you can link make.com to that sheet in many different ways, but what I like to do is just select from all, and it's going to ask for a spreadsheet ID, which you can get once again in the URL up here. So we're going to copy that URL after the d/ and before the /edit. And we're going to paste it in the spreadsheet ID section here, and then it's going to load in certain elements of the sheet that we just created here. And it's going to say, hey, what's the sheet name? And we're going to put sheet 1 here. And this sheet 1 is your tab, your tab name. I could change this to whatever, and then it would also appear in here, and you could reference whatever name you wanted to. And we have all of these rows based on the headers, right? So first name and last name in column B, and column C is email. So it's pulled in the headers. And what we want to do is we want to take the information from this form response where we had Jono, Catliff with this email and all that kind of stuff. And we want to automatically dump that data into Google Sheets. Now, how we do this is through something called mapping. What is brilliant about Make.com is that when you are dealing with modules, you have access to reference past information. So when this was ran, we collected the results. We collected the answers of the first name, last name, email, message, budget, and we can place those variables in this Google Sheet. So if we open this up and click into a field here, we want to add in the first name here, and we can find it conveniently here. Now, you might think, okay, I'm just going to add in that first name by clicking right there. But that is not going to get the value that we're looking for. You can see this nice little drop-down arrow here, which means that there's more information, and we have to click into that, then click in once again to the text answers, and then the value. And this is simply because these are different object types and data is nested further down. And we're going to talk about this later in the series, and you guys should pretty much fully understand this by then, but just for now, we're going to kind of leave it at that. We need to get the actual value here. So we're going to paste in the value of the first name. And lastly, we're going to do the same thing for all of these other fields as well. So we'll drill down, answer, value of the last name, email, and then we'll go to text answers, value, and then we're going to circle down to budget here, and we're going to enter in answers. Okay, perfect. So what this means is that when I put in the budget here, it's going to enter in not value here, but it's going to enter in $1,000 plus. So we're referencing it based on the key, which is value. Specifically, it's answers.budget.textanswers.answers.value. It's just drilling down from budget to text answers to value. And we're referencing the key here, and then we're passing in the value. So we have key value pairs. So similarly with the first name, when we drill down the value, first time it might be Jono, but the second form submission, it could be Richard, right? So this is always going to change. That looks good to me. And then we're just going to enter in false here to both of these. And lastly, we just want to enter in this, this message here, and then we're good to go. So I'll drill down and answer and put in the value here and click OK, save. And now what we want to do is we want to submit the form again. You could try running it again and maybe it'll give a response. Let's just take a look. Because no extra response has been submitted, it is not going to work. So we need to give it another response here. What I'm going to do is going to type in Richard Anderson, richard@gmail.com. Maybe his budget's $100 to $1,000, and I'm just going to put in whatever here. And we're going to come back to Make.com, and then we're going to hit this Run Once button down here, and you can see the scenario is running, and we have received the data. And this time, if we look into the first name, it's going to be Richard, right? And the data has been entered into this Google Sheet module. If we take a look at it, we can now see all of the results that we just entered in here. Now, the reason why I have these false values here is because in Google Sheets, you can just enter in checkboxes. These checkboxes have one of two values, either false if it's unchecked or true if it's checked, right? So that's just a bit more appealing to the eye in my personal opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep it just like that. Now, that's the first part of things. That's awesome. Now, the second thing is I want to talk about, now that we've actually built out this very basic scenario, let's make it more complicated. Let's give it some life. Let's, add things to it and make it more sophisticated, make it something that you guys would actually want to use. So how we're going to do that is we're going to right click on these three dots here, and we're going to add another module. You can also, for example, unlink it, and then these won't be connected anymore. You could essentially add a module, add a note, but we're just going to add a router here, or module and then flow control here, and then router. And what a router does is it allows you to go down multiple paths. So what happens here is with a router, it will go down all paths, and it will go down the top path to the bottom path in that order. So if you have 3 paths, it's going to start with the first path, then go to the second path, and then the third path. And you can see the label here: first, second, third. Right? We're just going to have 2 paths here. We're going to align this down here. And what I want to do is I want to essentially check to see, has this person already inquired before, right? Because if this person's already inquired before, maybe I don't want a duplicate. Maybe I only want Richard Anderson 1 time in this Google Sheet. If he inquires again, then I want to update his record on file, but I don't want to necessarily add him, right? Again, so we only want 1 instance of every single person. And this is super, super common. And this is really important for hygiene when it comes to databases. You don't want duplicates because it's going to be really difficult to deal with. So this is one of the best tips. And this is something I use all the freaking time in make.com. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have 2 scenarios. One scenario where we add the row, and then another scenario where we effectively update the row if this person exists. So we're going to go ahead and update this row now, and we're going to once again add all these modules in. So I'm going to select from all. We're going to add in the spreadsheet ID up at the top here, and we're going to go down the same process one more time. We're going to unmap this, select the sheet name, and then fill out the particular information. Now, there's a couple things here. We have row number. I'm going to put 2 for now because we need to find this. But essentially, Richard's on row 2. So if we wanted to update him, we would find Richard based on the row here. And we're going to talk about this in a second. But for now, what I want to do is I want to add in all this information. So once again, we're going to drill down. This time I'm going to search for values here, and we're going to add in the values of the first name here. So you can see like first name, text answers value, last name, text answers value. This is just a bit faster if we search for values, and then it's going to pull in all of these so we can easily reference it very quickly. We'll add in the message down here, and then we're going to add in the budget as well. And we can go ahead and just choose false and false here. Click OK. And I'm going to save this by hitting Command or Control S. Now, circling back, we don't know the row value, right? And for us to update the right person, well, we need to know their row value. So how do we figure this out? Well, we need to search this spreadsheet to find that person. And we need to find that person based on a unique identifier. Now, the thing is multiple people could have the name Richard. Multiple people could have the name Richard Anderson. Let's say you have a sheet of 50,000 people. There's bound to be 2 Richard Andersons in there, but not everyone's going to have the same email. This is a unique identifier. So we can search for somebody based on their email because there's only one email in the world like that. So coming back in here, what we're going to do is we're going to add another module in here. So on these 3 dots, we're going to right click and add a module in here. And this is going to be a Google Sheets module. But this time, what we're going to do is we're going to search rows. Okay. And we're going to click that. Okay. And we're going to set this up one more time. You can see it's a bit repetitive because it's going to ask us for the spreadsheet ID. So we need to come back in here and grab that spreadsheet ID one more time. And the thing is like, you only have to set this up once, then you never have to deal with this again. So I promise it's a bit tedious to set up, but once you get the ball rolling, it's just going to save you so much time. So we'll come in, add in the spreadsheet, find the sheet name, which once again is spreadsheet 1 down here, right? And you could have multiple tabs if you wanted to. And we need to search by something. So by default, I just leave table contains headers, right? Because it does contain headers here in the first row. But moving forward, we need to have a couple things. Column range, I just leave this as default, but you could have like column A to CZ, which just means like how far in the sheet do you want it to search? Do you want it to search from A to C? Do you want it to search from A to Z all the way down here? Like how far are we talking about? I just leave this as a default, and then we have a filter step. And this filter step is how we find the result we're looking for. And we need to find it based on the unique identifier, which in this case is the email here. So what we need to do is select column C, which is email, and then we need to search for the email that was submitted in this form, right? So remember, somebody submits the form, they provide their email. We have that email by the time it reaches the search step. We're going to add that email into the value here to search for that value. If it exists, we update the person. If it doesn't exist, then we create a new contact. So I'm going to search in the bar here for value, and we're going to add in this email here. Okay, so now we're searching for that. This is fantastic. We'll save it. We can come into the update row section here. And now that we know the row number here, we can actually delete the 2. And in the sidebar here, you can see row number. You can also search for row number as well. And this is going to tell us the row number that we found. So let's just take a step back here. Okay, result comes in with a form submission, right? They fill out their email. We're going to take that email. We're going to try and find it here. If that exists, we want to update the person, right? Because we already have a contact with richard@gmail.com. We don't want 2, we just want 1. So we're going to update it. If it doesn't exist, then we go ahead and we create it, right? And if we want to update it, then how we go ahead and update it is by locating the person by their row number. And we know that Richard is on row 2 because we searched for the email, and it gave us in this search result the entire row here, including the row number, saying, hey, we found Richard. This is the email that you wanted us to find. We found it. It's in row 2. And then we take the information that we received in the search rows module, and then we paste it in the row number, and this will allow us to update it. Now, just one more thing here is currently right now, this is going to run both instances, right? And we don't want that to happen. We want to only update one or the other. Sorry, add one or update the other, depending on whether or not that row is found. We only want to add or update, but not both. So we're going to go ahead and set a filter here. Okay. Now this filter is going to say we're going to label this doesn't exist. So this person does not exist yet. And we're going to have a condition. So a condition needs to be met in order for this to continue. We only want to add somebody into this sheet if they don't exist. And we know they don't exist because this row number here does not exist. So let's take a step back. This row number doesn't exist. So we're going to search for this person. And let's say we search for test@gmail.com, right? And there's no email test@gmail.com. Then this is going to return nothing. So that row number is not going to exist. Now, on the flip side, we can say exists up here. And if that row number does exist, and let's say we search for richard@gmail.com, well, then it's going to essentially find a row number, and then it's going to not add something. It's just going to update something. So let's go ahead and test this out. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to submit another response here. And I'm going to, first of all, create a contact for myself. So Jono Catliff, test@gmail.com. We're going to choose a budget, which is going to be like under $100. And I'm just going to submit whatever. Come back in here, click this run once module down at the bottom here, and we're going to load these results into the does not exist path. You can see it did enter this, right? So it did pass this condition because we couldn't find anything in the search step. It returned nothing. And because it returned nothing, that row doesn't exist. So we added it, but we didn't update it because it didn't exist, right? So coming back into the spreadsheet, now we have this particular person added in. Now let's go ahead and let's submit another form. And this time we're going to update Richard, right? So we'll do like Richard Smith this time, and we'll add in his email. And then we're going to put in like $1,000 plus, and we're going to add in another thing here and come back and run this one more time. And because we now found Richard Smith, you can see all of the information here. We have successfully found him, and we didn't add him, we updated him. And in this module, you can see that his name was changed from Smith or Anderson to Smith. So what is this all about? Well, first of all, you can segment paths. So you can push people down different routes depending on conditional logic. And then you can set up filters in make.com to say, hey, only pass this step if a certain condition is met, right? So this is super useful because now all of a sudden you can create these dynamic workflows that can get forever like more complicated, which will allow you to build really almost anything that you want to. This is like such powerful logic built into this that you guys just learned, right? So just as a recap so far, we've connected in Google Forms and Google Sheets. We've searched for something. We've learned how to search, add, and update. And we've learned how to route down different paths and filter depending on the results so far. So that's really, really cool. Now let's talk about something else that's super powerful here that I use almost every single day, and you should definitely master this. So the next thing here is if we open up one of these modules, either the add or update rows section here, and we go to rejected. Well, let's say that we want to reject somebody if their budget is less than $1,000 or above. So somebody comes in, they fill this form and they choose a budget and it's like less than $100 or it's $100 to $1,000. Maybe this just isn't going to cut it for your business. You want people that have over $1,000, right? And you want to make sure that automatically we filter that out so that if somebody has less than $1,000, they're classified as rejected, which will be like this. And if they have a budget over $1,000, then they're good to go. And we want to call these people and reach out to them immediately. This is where something called functions come in. This manipulates data in real time, right? So in make.com, if we click on a field and we go up to the top here, you have all different types of functions. You have general functions here. You have math functions. You have text functions, time functions, and array functions. And array functions are pretty advanced, right? So just as an example, like you could have something like seal here, and if you add in the number 1.2, it'll automatically bring it up to the highest integer, right? So it'll bring it from 1.2 to 2. You could also round a number as well. So 1.2 would be rounded down to 1, 1.5 would be rounded up to 2. So those are some math functions here. But one of my favorites, and I think one of the most practical ones here, I'm going to delete this, is an if statement. So we have an if statement, and this takes 3 separate conditions here. There's 3 slots to add information in. So you can see here, if condition is met, you either go down path A or you go down path B. So if 1 equals 1, we're going to go down this path here. But if 1 equals 2, which is not true, then we have like a fallback value almost, if you will. So if the condition is true, then we go down path A. If the condition is false, then we go down path B. So in practicality, what this looks like is if I say, hey, if 1 equals 1, then we would go down path A. We would not go down path B. We'd only go down path A because this condition is met. If 1 equals 2, then we would not go down path A. We'd go down path B because 1 does not equal 2. So we don't go down the first path. We go down the second path. So all this is to say is we want to set up a scenario where we reject people automatically. So how we can do that is we can delete this, and we're going to go back into the star function here, and we're going to type in value at the top here. And I want to find this budget value, which is right here, right? So we're going to add in this budget value here, and I'm going to go into the general tab here, this gear icon, and click equals. Now here, we need to add the value that is going to allow us to pass into option A. And this is $1,000 plus, right? So if they fill out this budget form and they put $1,000 in here, then we're going to go down path A. But if they put in options 100 or less than 100 or 100 to 1,000, then it's going to go down path B. So in order for us to get this practically onto this rejected column here, what I want to do is make sure that if their budget equals 1,000 plus, then it's set to false. Otherwise, it's set to true. So in other words, if their budget equals $1,000, we do not want to reject them. But if their budget's like $100 here, like this, then we would check off rejected. We know this person is rejected, and that's that. So this is how functions work in make.com, where you can have conditional statements to deliver whatever that you can conditionally render logic, right? So this is really, really powerful stuff. So I'm going to click OK there. And I'm also going to add this down to the rejected tab here. Now, just before we test this out, I want to add one more function here. And this is in the add a row module, this Google Sheets module up top here. And we're going to go into the initially contacted field here. And we want to add in a time that this person contacted us, right? Or at least the first time they contacted us. And in make.com, we have another kind of semi-function here, I guess, is if we go over to the date and time functions here, we have this variable now. And this variable now will give us like the exact date. So it would be like November, it wouldn't be formatted in this way. It would be like November 6th, 2024, 7:19 p.m. is like, I'm just looking at my time up here, but this is like essentially, it would be down to the millisecond, I believe, or the second at least, of when somebody inquired. And that's what this now function does. The problem is that I don't want it to be, I don't want it to be displayed like that. So in order for me to best do this, I want to show you an example here. So I'm going to select $100 to $1,000 here. I'm going to save this scenario, and I'm going to put in Bob I don't know, and test2@gmail.com. And we'll just add in another message here, submit it, and run this scenario. We're going to create a contact here. Now you can see that this format isn't very friendly, and you can see that he was also rejected too because he selected $100 to $1,000. It wasn't the $1,000 plus threshold that we had in mind. I don't like this format. I want it to be more friendly, like November, for example, like November 6th, 2024, something like that. So how we can change this is we're going to come back in here and create a function again. And this second function, going back to the format date and time function, is we have these functions down here, right? And we have this format date function. And this format date function essentially allows us to change the format of a date. You can see some examples here where if you put in like month, /day, day, /year, year, it's going to come out in that format, right? So let's go ahead and let's change this. We have two fields that we have to fill in. The first field is the actual date that we want to add in, which is right now. It's down to the millisecond or down to the second. And then we want to add in the actual formatting that we want. So I want 3 letters or 3 characters for the month, 1 character for the day, and 4 for the year. What this is going to practically look like is NOV, like NOV 6 2024. And I'm only going to do this to the add row because if we update them, they've already inquired before. I don't want to update this field. And I'm going to essentially create another contact here, and I'll just call this test. I'll just add in a bunch of BS here, click everything I can, and then submit it. And we'll run the scenario one more time. And we're going to create this new contact. Okay. Now in this new contact, we have a new way of formatting that particular date. So that is the power of functions in make.com. This is really game changing. At least it is for me, and I use this pretty much every single day. Now, another thing here that I want to go over, and you might be wondering, hey, Jono, like, why did you ask them for the website? Were you just putting that in there for some random detail, or is there purpose there? And if you wondered that, you'd be correct. This is for a given reason. Now, the reason why is because a lot of the times when you're dealing with data, it's not submitted in the format that you want it to be submitted in. And that really sucks, right? Because like, let's say somebody comes in here and they put in a bunch of gibberish and then they put in their website like this, right? Or they, whatever, right? This isn't going to help you out if you have to put in the exact website. Like maybe you need to submit the exact website, pull it out, and enter that into the CRM programmatically, right? And it can't have these additional things in here. So how would you go about doing that? Well, a lot of people watching this might be like, well, the only way really I can think of is by doing that by hand. But we can programmatically grab this text out, and this is where text parsing comes in. And this is so common. I can't even begin to tell you how much I use this. It's all the time. It is all the time. And this is something that you'll likely be using all the time. And this is like a game changer when you start using make.com, because data just doesn't come in the way you want it. And that sucks. And sometimes you have to match things. Like a perfect example would be like you have data coming in as Canada, but you need to match it to the country code CA, right? So obviously, you have to manipulate the data in some way. So how you'd go about doing this, we're going to add in another module here, okay? And this is going to be a text parser. And in this text parser, there is a lot of different things we can do here, but I want to match elements here. Okay, this is the simplest way we can do it. And the pattern is that I want to grab an HTTP address, and I'm just going to leave all of this by default. I want the full address, and we have to pass in the text. Now, the text we're passing in is from this field here, right? So we're going to come in here and type in at the top value, and then go down to this message value down here. Oops, and pass in the right value. And we need to strip out that particular email or that particular domain, right? We'll click OK. Now, you can see here that if we come into any module here and we click on the website, it has the match. So we're going to add this in here, but sometimes it doesn't give you that information. Like you don't have like the particular value you need. So what we could do is we could come in here and right click on this text parser and run this module only. And then it's just going to ask us for any random arbitrary thing. So I'm going to type in this and then HTTPS google.com, and we'll run this. We'll click OK. And we can see the value of the response here. It pulled out HTTPS google.com. It deleted everything else, right? And because the value was correct, it was match. Now we're going to match. We're going to add the match in here to the website module. We'll go ahead and update a row here and add in match as well. Okay, sweet. We'll click OK and save this, and we could go ahead and run this one more time, but I'm just going to add in 2 more modules here to show you guys 2 more examples of doing this, because I think this is super important. Another thing here is if this becomes more complicated and you don't have like a match element to pull out exactly what you're looking for, you can come in and add regex in here. And regex is regular expressions in JavaScript. I don't even know how to do this properly. I just use ChatGPT to do this. So if you need to pull certain text off a page, what you can do, and it's not like a website, it's like a specific word, and it's always at the same point in time, you can add a module in here, and you can do text parser again, and show more, and then match pattern advanced, okay? These are pretty much the same thing. And we're just going to add in the text one more time here. So we want to pull it out from, let's say, that particular comment section down here, right? So when somebody fills out this message field, we want to pull that out, right? But we need a pattern, and this is a regular expression, right? So in other words, and I can type in what is a regular expression, and you guys can kind of take a look here and see, but more or less, in the most dry language, it's a sequence of symbols and characters expressing a string or pattern to be searched. You're just using patterns to like find certain codes. So I want to have a pattern to pull out a phone number, an email. I want to pull out the first name, the last name. I want to pull out the date. I want to pull out the service that they're looking for. I want to pull out the location. I want to pull out the city. I want to pull out the country. Whatever the specific information you're looking for to pull out, you can do that. Now we'll open up ChatGPT here because I don't even know these regular expressions off the top of my head. Okay, and we're going to come into this and we're just going to ask it to please create a regex, a JavaScript regular regex pattern to extract a URL. And we'll click enter, and it's literally just going to pull out this whole thing here. Right? This pattern, I don't know this. I don't care to really know this, but I'm just going to copy this and then paste it in here. And we can just simply click OK. And this is how you'd go about the process of finding even more complicated or more advanced things that you want to pull out. And we can just run this and test and see, hey, does this work? Because I don't know if it does. So this is where we're going to come in and test and see. Okay, so input, it didn't actually end up working. So we'll just go ahead and try this one more time. And this time I'll copy in the text here, right? To give it an example. Here's an example of the regular, here's an example of what the text would look like. And I'm gonna put a colon here, paste that in. I want to pull out, and then I'll add in the value. Can you please provide me with a regex formula in JavaScript for this? Giving an example is going to really help it understand what you're looking for. So we can go ahead and we can try this one more time and see if this works properly. Okay, so I'll add this pattern right back in here again. And this is just simply trial and error. I don't really know until I try it, but let's take a look and see. We'll click OK and run it, and it still didn't work. And lastly, we're going to try one more time here. And instead, oh, I see here, I didn't pull it in the right thing. We want to grab it between the two backslashes here. So it's always between \1 and \2. And this is just essentially saying it's like a global variable, but we don't actually have to pull that in. So, you know, it can get pretty technical here. I'll just add this in one more time, run this module, add it in. I'll add in the text that they put in here, value, click OK. And here we go. So we have the fallback match value and pulled that out. Now, this is common. This is something that you guys should definitely know. This is a game changer for me. I can't tell you how many times I'll get leads coming in. On the topic of leads, I'll have leads coming in from like third-party vendors like The Knot, because we're in the wedding space, or Bark. You might be using something like some other repositories like maybe Angie's List or Thumbtack or whatever. Maybe they send you an email with that list, and this is and you need to pull out information from that email. This is a great way to be like, hey, I need to grab the first name and the last name and the email and the phone number so it can enter them into a CRM in real time and call them or text them or email them or whatever, right? So super, super powerful stuff. Now, just one last way of doing this is the next thing is AI. So I'm going to go over how you guys can use artificial intelligence in make.com. And you don't just have to use it for pulling data out. You can use it for a million things like building blogs or whatever the use case is, but we're going to go ahead and just show you how AI works in ChatGPT, because this is the second most common thing that people use in ChatGPT, or in make.com. So we'll type in ChatGPT here, and there's lots of different stuff. You can create a completion here, which is just essentially like typing in something like ChatGPT. You can analyze image, you can generate an image, you can edit an image, you can generate audio, so many things, right? Super powerful stuff. But in this case, we're going to create a completion here, and we're going to have to create an account. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to connect an account. Now, how you guys find this is just going to platform.openai.com, and in your account, if you haven't done so, you're gonna have to sign up for the essentially to get like an API token. Okay, so just so you guys are aware, when you go to the API keys in your platform.openai.com account, you can just create a secret key here. Once you create that secret key, you can add that in. And if you want the organization ID, you just have to go to the general tab and then you're good to go. Make sure you go down to billing as well. You have to add in a minimum of $5 into ChatGPT to use this. This is not like the general interface here, which is free to use. When you're dealing with the API in make.com, you have to pay $5 to start using. So coming back into our make.com account here, once we've connected it in, we can select a method, and we're just going to create a ChatGPT completion. The model that we're going to use is going to be 4.0 mini. This is just like a lightweight model. It's a bit cheaper, and it's not gonna cost a lot of money. You have max token completion tokens. Now, for something like this, we probably only need like 200 tokens, but essentially tokens is the amount of money you're spending. So I think how it works is with tokens, it's defined as a certain amount of characters. Let's say it's like 2 characters for 1 token, just as an example, and they charge you on the token. So the longer the input and the output, the more money you're spending. Also, each model has different pricing. With 4.0 mini, it's cheaper than if you were to use just 4.0 system, right? So we're going to save a tiny bit of money, but we're talking about like fractions of a cent here. Now, what we want to do is we want to enter in a message here. And in this message, we're going to have a user message. Message is like the input that you provide ChatGPT for your question. Like, hey, can you do this for me, right? That's what a user message does. So we're going to say, can you please pull out the website from this text, please? We'll put a colon, and then we can put down here the actual message that we received. And then it's just going to pull out that website, right? And we're going to add 2 more messages in here. So we're going to add another message. And the assistant message is the response that ChatGPT gives back. You're essentially telling ChatGPT, hey, this is what an appropriate response would look like. So it would be like https://www.make.com, right? And then we can add 1 more message in here, which is a system message, which is giving context to ChatGPT to understand what it is that you actually want it to help assist you with. So in this system message, we're just going to say, you're an intelligent bot that can find websites in blocks of text. Please do not include any intros or outros. Just give a response with the website in it, right? We don't want it to be like, hey, sure, no problem. Here's the response. Then it gives us the website. We just want the website, and that's it, right? Nothing else. Okay, so we can click save here, and we're good to go. We can run this scenario after testing this form 1 more time, and then we're going to be good to go, and we'll move on to the next scenario afterwards. So we're going to come in here and say, Dylan, gosh, I can't think of last names. This is an appropriate one for now, 234@gmail.com. Budget is going to be $1,000 plus, and the website's going to be like, sure, here's my website, and then it's going to be like https google.com, and we're going to submit this. We're going to run this module, and we're going to get the response here. Okay, we'll take a look at the first one. It pulls out the website, and then with the advanced formula, it also pulls out the website. And also with ChatGPT, it also pulls out the website. So these are 3 separate ways that you can pull out information from text, right? This is super powerful. Because that person doesn't exist, we went ahead and we updated the sheet with a new response. Because they had $1,000 plus, we did not reject them. Okay, so this is the first scenario. We've gone through so much stuff together, but let's just recap it. We've gone through the UI interface here. We've gone through triggers, and we've gone through actions. We have gone through connecting in modules and adding and testing modules, sending that over to Google Sheets, right? We've gone through the process of going down multiple paths, filtering out specific information, having a 2-step process to look up information and then evaluate it based on what we found. And then what we essentially also did was used functions in line to essentially manipulate the data to get the response that we're looking for, and then pull information out using regular expressions in JavaScript and also artificial intelligence to once again manipulate the data to get exactly what we're looking for so that we can clean up the workflow. Last thing down here is we're going to add just 1 more step here, and this is just going to be sending off this data into like an email, into Slack, all of that kind of stuff, right? So let's go ahead, let's add this in. So first thing we're going to do here is we're going to type in email, and we're going to send an email. And once again, we can create a connection here. And just with this being said, guys, you do actually need to have a Google Suite email. You cannot use a free email easily. If you want to figure out how to use a free email, you can go ahead to this online help form here. It's going to walk you through it. But to be honest with you, this is a bit complicated. And because it's so complicated, I don't want to talk about it in this module. So I'm just going to go ahead and assume that for you guys watching this out there, you have a Google business email account, and you can just type this into Google and it should pull up as the first response, like create a Google workspace. You can sign up for like a free account and try the trial out if you want to do that. But essentially you need a paid email here. So the email address that we're going to add in here, I'm going to choose the value, and it's going to be the value of the email. The subject line is going to say new lead. And you know what, instead of sending it to them, I'm going to send it to myself just so I can notify myself that a new lead's coming. So I know and I can follow up with this person. The subject line will be new lead. The content type is going to be plain text. So I don't want to have to format an email with HTML. I just want it to be plain text. And then lastly, we're going to add in some content here. So we're going to say new lead, and then it's going to be name, email, message, and then budget here. And we can go ahead and just simply add in all of these different parameters here, like the budget here, and then email ourselves with all of this information so that, you know, we can determine really quickly if we want to jump on a call or whatnot with that particular client. Okay, sweet. So we have email, and then we also have the name of the person as well. Oops, not that one. Okay, sweet. So we've gone ahead and we have we've created this for us. Oh, okay, I just see there's an error here, and we'll click OK. And lastly, I guess it wants me to connect in, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to connect into my account, and I'll be back after this is done. Okay, so I've gone ahead and connected in my account. Once again, this is a business account, right? So it's not like at gmail.com. It's rather like a, you know, at companyname.com, right? So you can sign up for this if you want using the Google Workspace. So once again, Workspace, they'll sign you up. You have to pay. You can downgrade for a free trial immediately or cancel your account right away. So this is the Google Workspace that I'm talking about, where you can just create an account, and then this is the email that you'd use to log in there. Or you can alternatively just not have an email and skip this module altogether. So we'll click OK. And then what I want to do is just lastly, two other things is I want to talk about sending this over to Slack as well. And you could just, you know, for example, send this to Slack. So we'll create a message here. And lastly, you could also just add this into your particular, CRM, right? So I use Go High Level. So I could be like, create a contact in here. So we'll go ahead and create a contact. And then from there, we just create a connection and add that contact in. How you do both of these things is essentially exactly what we've done here, is just map these fields right into it. So I'll go ahead and I'll create the Slack module here. I'm not going to do the Go High Level module because it's going to be pretty much virtually identical to the Slack module here. So if you understand how to do Slack, you'll also understand how to do the Google or the Go High Level module. And the reason we're doing the Slack module is because we have to use this for the next step as well. This is something that you can get a free trial on, or just have a free account in general, but you can use any messaging platform you want. You could do Facebook Messenger, you could do WhatsApp here. You could do text messaging through something called Twilio. So if we type in Twilio, this is going to be a bit complicated, more complicated to set up. You could send yourself, you could potentially even message through whatever application you want, right? So in this tutorial, we're just going to use Slack, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a free account here in Slack, and then we're going to walk through this together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new workspace. Okay, so we'll create a workspace again. Okay, and I'm just going to give it a really beautiful name, something that I took a lot of time to think about. We'll click next. I'm just going to skip this step for now, skip it, and once again, put a name in there, and I'm going to start with a free plan. Okay, sweet. So this looks good to me. We have pretty much everything good to go. We have our account. All of that looks good, right? In Slack, we're going to go ahead and connect this in. choose a connection type. It's going to be a user because I want to make sure that we're actually sending a message here. We'll click save. It's going to ask us for authentication. Because we're already logged into Slack, it should just know that we're logged in here. And it's just going to say, hey, do you allow permission here? I'm going to say, of course, I trust make.com with my life. I'm just kidding. I absolutely don't trust make.com with my life, but I trust a lot. So we'll click OK. We'll connect it back in. We're good to go. Now we can just go ahead and create that message here, right? So the message that I want to send is just essentially this exact message here. And we're going to send this over to slack.com. There's the text. Channel name, we're going to actually just drill down and get here. I want to send it to this beautiful, test channel here, all test 1, 2, 3. That actually doesn't look like the right channel here. Change this over. We'll refresh this. Okay, sweet. So we got the social tab here. Let's just go ahead and run this module and we'll just make sure that it actually works. We'll put in some default values here. Doesn't really matter what we say, just as long as we put some answers in here, and we'll click OK. And let's see if this actually appeared in the social message. So it did not, which means that I have this connected to another account. Okay, so I actually went ahead and I connected the wrong account in here. So I'm just going to open up the Slack module. I'm going to add it again, choose a user. And sometimes this will happen, right? You'll go back and forth, you'll choose the wrong account, and then you just load in another account. So instead of this test 1, 2, 3, I'm going to come to this drop down and click this beautiful name. I'm not even going to even pretend to, I understand how to say that. That's just not going to happen ever. And we should have this connected in now, and we're good to go. We will send that message over. So I'm just going to choose the right channel here, select from a list, and it will be a public channel. And we will do stfad this. Okay, I think I got as close as possible. That's pretty much it. We'll click OK, run this module. I'm just going to add in one response here and click OK. And let's see. So circling back in this channel here, we have the new message coming in. I just put a default there and left everything else blank, but now this is working. So this is, in a nutshell, the first workflow that we're going to build out. And it's also the longest workflow that we're going to build out too, just because there was a lot of information that we had to go over in order to get this far. For you to go high level, you just essentially do the same thing in Slack. You'd put in the first name for the first name variable, last name for the last name variable, and so on and so forth. So we'll save changes. We're going to come in and we're going to create another module here. Okay. And this next module here is going to be, it will have the creative name of test scenario number 2. And with this massive trigger here, now what we're going to do is choose tools, and we are going to choose a set variable. Okay. So what's going on here is we want to effectively, if I just zoom out at a high level, we want to once a day come in, we want to search for our Google spreadsheet, right? To see, hey, in this spreadsheet, is there anyone that hasn't been contacted, right? That inquired today. And it's going to pull that in, and then it's going to send me a message in Slack being like, here's a list of everyone that we haven't contacted today. Right? And that's exactly what we're building out in this workflow. So in order to do this, I'm going to start with a set variable here. And this is going to be called today. Now, in this variable, what I want to do is I want to create a structure for that date that is very similar to what we have here, which is November 6th. Okay, so how we do this is we're just going to come in and we're going to we're going to create the variable value as exactly what we did in the last scenario. So in the date and time function, we're going to format a date, which takes 2 variables. The first is the date, which is right now, and we're going to format it exactly the same as we did before. And the reason we want to format it exactly the same is because we want to search for that exact date, and it has to be a carbon copy. It has to be exactly November 6th spelled like that so that we can find all the records that look like that, right? So in order to do this, we're going to do MMM space D space YYYY. Click OK, and we'll run this scenario. We'll take a look, and this, if we command F, we can see it matches everything here. But if I, for example, was to go like this and put a 0 there, well, it wouldn't match everything. So that's obviously a problem. So we need this to be identical to how it's typically formatted. The next step here is we're going to create a Google Sheets lookup here. So we're going to search for rows. And we're going to set up this module, and then I'm going to explain the principle that we're learning through this. So we'll select from all sheets, and we'll come back in just like we've done many times before. We'll grab the ID, we'll paste that ID in, and we'll select the sheet name. And this time, the filter, instead of the email, is we're going to filter based on the initially contacted date, and that is going to be equal to today, which is the value that we just created. So once again, we formatted the date for today, and then we're going to search for that. And before I fire this off, I want to come down to the scheduling here, and it says by default this runs every 15 minutes. I'm going to change this to run every day, and I want this to run right after my workday ends. So for example, maybe it ends at 9 p.m. Okay, and I want this to run at 9 p.m. every single day. So after I'm done, it's going to take all of those. It's going to send me a message. So when I come back in the office the next day, I can see, okay, these are the people that haven't been called. Okay, and automatically once a day, 9 p.m., this is going to run. And when we run this scenario by testing it out, we can see that we have 5 results here. Right? So we have bundle output 1, bundle output 2, bundle output 3, bundle output 4, bundle output 5, which means that if I was to set a variable here, just to show you guys what this looks like, and I put test and I put test and I click OK, and I run this scenario again, this module ran 1 time, but this module ran 5 times. It ran once for every single bundle output. So you might be scratching your head being like, okay, what does that mean? This is where we talk about JSON, because it's really important to understand data types in make.com. So to put it as simply as possible, there are certain data types in make.com. There are text data types, there's number data types, there's an array data type, collections, Boolean, date, and binary data, okay? Or data, depending on how you say it. So I've given some examples here, and then I'm going to walk through what this practically looks like with just dummy data here so you can take a look. So you probably know what a text is. So think about the lead's name or the message. It's like their name, Jane Doe, or a comment they left, right? Which is this message that we had people submitting. But this is a text field. It's just their name. Now, just taking a step back here with JSON, there's key value pairs, like I mentioned earlier. So the key is name. This is how we reference the name, but the value is going to change every single time. So the first time it might be Jane Doe. The second time it might be John Smith. The third time it might be Richard Atkinson. The fourth time it's going to be Jono, whatever, right? It's always going to change, but the key, how we reference it, never changes. That stays the same. That's how we identify the value and use that to, essentially reference it later on in these workflows. So that's what a text string is. Now, a number, you probably already know what this is as well. It's like somebody's age or the budget they provided, like $1,000. In our case, we're not using a number because this is actually more like a text string, because a number would be like 1,000 or 2 or 1.32, but this is using special characters. So that means that it's a string down here. So it's a pure number, right? So what that practically looks like is 50 or 5,000. This even wouldn't be a number. So it'd be more like this, 5,000, or it'd be like 1.32, right? And then we have an array, and an array is something that's probably going to be new to you. An easier way to think about this is list. Okay, it's like going to the grocery store and you have a list of things that you need to get from the store, right? So an arrays are lists of items related to that lead. So imagine they listed on your website, you list several services that you offer and you say, hey, which ones are you interested in? Somebody selects DJ services and photography services and video services. They can have a list of multiple services. In Make.com, what that looks like is something like this. And you can see in light gray, it says array. So interests could be, I'm interested in DJ services. I'm interested in photography services. I'm interested in video services. This is a text array because these are text fields. You can have an array of text fields. You can have an array of numbers. You can have an array of any data type, right? So any of these data types, pretty much, you can have an array of. The next thing is called collections. And this is where most people get confused between collections and arrays. So in a collection, this is all the detailed bundles together about the lead. It's kind of like a folder. So think about when you create like a Google Drive folder and you add a bunch of things in there. It might have labels such as name, email, company. It's not a list, but it could have multiple different data types. It could have the text string here. It could have a number string here. It could have an array in there as well. It could have a date in there. There's all these different types, but essentially with a list or an array, typically speaking, you're going to usually have one data type in it, a list of text, a list of numbers, a list of objects, right? So just circling back here, a lead could have a collection with different labeled pieces inside, like name and contact info and job title and the services they inquired for, and also the employee account and all of this kind of stuff, right? So those are the two most complicated ones. And then you have Boolean. This is like a yes or no logic. It can either be yes or it can be no, but instead it's true or false. It's like, are you interested in premium services? True or false? It's one of the two, but it's not both at the same time. There's no other potential values. It's only true or false. And then date, obviously, it's just the date they submitted. Like, for example, it's like the date they submitted the form or the date you followed up with them. For instance, it would be today's date, right? And then binary data, this is not something that is used very often, but essentially in Make.com, you can get data in multiple file formats. You can have images with, like, for example, a URL where you could go visit the URL, or you could actually have the binary code for the image, and you may have to manipulate it depending on what your intended use case is. I'm not going to go super far into this, but you can usually have data in links or in binary data, and you can swap them back and forth in Make.com. This is not very common, so I'm not going to go over that in this video. Now, that's essentially the data types. Now, why I wanted to bring this up is because an array is a list. And if we come back to what we have built out here, this is different bundles, right? And a bundle in this case is an object, right? So an object, if we circle back to what it looks like, it's, details bundled together about the lead like a folder. It might have labels like name, email, company, right? So you have, for example, in bundle 1, it's the first lead. You can think about this as just leads. The first bundle is lead number 1, which is Richard Smith. The second bundle is lead number 2, which is Jono Catliff. The third bundle is Bob A, which is, the third lead. But this is all wrapped around a list. So what you don't see here is that this is a list of multiple different things. And essentially what's going on here is because you're getting one result that turns into 5, what's happening behind the scenes is this list, you're going through, you're iterating through it one at a time. And this is where data structures come into play at Make.com. I do have a full course on data structures in JSON in Make.com, but essentially with lists, you can have multiple leads and you go through them one at a time, right? So if I was to come in here and just showcase this so it's a bit more visual, I'll put a sleep on this and we're going to wait 2 seconds. So it's going to hit this module and it's going to wait 2 seconds and then continue on. So we're going to go through the first result, wait 2 seconds. And then we're going to go to the first result. And then we're going to go to the second result and wait 2 seconds. And then we're going to go to the third result and wait 2 seconds. Then the fourth result and then the fifth result. We're going through or iterating or going one at a time through every single one of these bundles, right? So first we go through Richard Smith, then we go through Jono Catlett, then we go through Bob A, then we go through test and test 2, and so on and so forth to reach the end, right? So this is what iteration is. And iteration only happens on one data type, which is arrays or lists. So in practicality, in make.com, you have something called an iterator here, and you can put data through this iterator, and through this iterator, and it'll go through it one at a time. But they also have certain modules like Google Sheets, where you have a search step where it returns multiple different rows at the same time, because all of these rows match this condition because it was, created at the same day. It's going to return all of those. And because it returns all of those, it's a list of all of those results, right? So we're going to go through it one at a time, okay? So another way to do this is if you have a list already, you can use the iterator to go through it. So that's essentially more or less what iteration is. I'm just going to cover it with this Google Sheets module just so you guys understand how this works. Now, with this iterator, what we want to do is we want to send off a message to ourselves in Slack, in this channel, every single time, every day that goes by, with every every person that was not contacted. So the next thing we're going to do here is an aggregator. So inversely to the iterator, which goes through a list one at a time, an aggregator bundles it all back together again. So you could go through it one at a time and then take those 5 results and merge it into one result again. So if you recall, this ran 5 times, and then when it gets the array aggregator, it's going to merge them into one again. So let's build this out. So in tools, you can use the array aggregator up here, but for the purpose of this, we're going to use something called a text aggregator. It's going to bundle all those results back together. The source module is going to be the Google Sheets module, which is just essentially saying in the source module, where is this list coming from, right? And the list is derived from the Google Sheets because we're going to pull in a list of all of these contacts because they all match the date. And then what's going to happen is it's going to reach this step and it's going to bundle them all together. So let's go ahead and do that. We want to make sure we send a message for only people that have not been contacted yet. So before we even send a message here, we're going to add a filter step here. Filter not contacted, and we're going to put in the conditional logic here that contacted is equal to false. So if, for example, 2 people have been contacted, they're not going to be showing up in this message. It's only going to be these last 3 people that have not been contacted showing up in this message. And we're going to come back into this text aggregator and pass in the text here that we want to send off as a message. So I'll say, for example, name, email, budget, message. And we can just simply add these fields in by mapping them: first name, last name, email, and then we'll do budget, and then we'll do message as well. Sweet. And this is going to bundle that all together. Let's go ahead and run this and take a look at what this looks like here. We can see 3 things passed here because these 2 were filtered out. We've already contacted them before. And this message now looks like this. We're aggregating it together. So remember how we took this list of 5 people, 5 people here, and we filtered out. We went through them one by one. We filtered out the 2 that had already been contacted, which left us with these 3 here. And then we created a message. We bundled those 3 together and created a message with the output looking like this. The first one is Bob A. Okay, the first one is this person because we haven't contacted them. And then the second person down here is the name. is test2, which is also this person. And then the third person is Dylan, whatever that name is. And that's the third person here, right? So now we're bundling all those results back together. Otherwise, if we were just to add another module here, and once again, this is really important to understand these, iterators and aggregators, just so you guys understand. If we set a variable here and we put message here instead, and we click OK, and we copy this message over, this is just to show you guys what this looks like, and we run this one more time, what's going to happen is this has created 3 messages, right? One for each person individually, but the aggregator bundled them all together. So we don't have individual messages for Bob, test, and the second test. We have one message that contains Bob and both tests together. And this is important because maybe I don't want to send myself 3 messages and get the notifications 3 times, right? That's a simplistic version, but let's say you had 700 different people that need to be contacted in one day. This is just an exaggeration. You probably don't want your message binging every second, being like bing, 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 until like 700 times because you had that many people. You just want one message being like, hey, here's the summary of the day, right? So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to delete this module. We're going to auto align it back together. We have the 3 messages here. We're going to go on to the next step, which is a Slack message, right? So we're going to create a message and we're going to say new uncalled leads for the day. And we'll pass in this message here. We'll select the channel from a list. It's going to be a public channel, and it's going to be this. Oops, I need to connect the right account in here again. Once again, sometimes it is confusing. Select from a list, public channel, and that is going to be this beautiful name here. We'll click OK. You'll see that there's no message so far, and we'll run one more time. Actually, this just needs to be saved one more time. And we're going to run it. And now we have received that message all bundled together, right? If we want these on separate lines, because obviously this doesn't look good with like message and then it ends up going straight to the next thing, we can come to this text aggregator, show advanced settings here, and the row separator will be a new row so that when we click OK, save, and run this one more time, now that message is going to come through and this person is now on a separate line, right? This person is now on a separate line as well. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, how JSON works, how iterators work, how aggregators work. This is like super common stuff. This is the foundation of make.com, and this is super important to know. And you can see in this kind of thing, it says collection here, but these are individual collections. But what it doesn't say for whatever reason is this is also wrapped in an array, and it'll go through each one individually, one by one. So that's how we can use JSON, iterators, and aggregators. The next thing that I want to talk about here is error handling. So take something like Google Sheets, for example. You will encounter errors in make.com, right? It's important to understand how this works. So something called rate limiting in Google Sheets. So if we come in here, Google Sheets API has a per minute quota for requests, and it resets every minute. And this limit is 300. So in what rate limiting is you can request a certain amount of resources in a given amount of time. Pretty much every single application has this. This is almost universal against all major applications. The reason why they have this is because, let's say, like, let's just say, for example, somebody wants to hack your account. They test a billion passwords at the same time. It's going to overload that system, and that whole server is going to crash, right? You also don't want somebody to be able to test a billion passwords at the same time to eventually find the right one. So you rate limit them to say like, hey, you can only do 100 in a minute's time. And then once you go to 101, you're cut off and you can no longer use this API for a certain amount of time. An API is just like any of these. It's like you can't update Google Sheets, or you can't use that for a certain amount of time. So you might be thinking, well, I'm only using it once here. But if you were to iterate through, let's say you're data dumping 700 clients in from your CRM and you wanted to add them into a Google Sheet just like this, well, you could add 700 people in like literally 10 seconds. And then you'd hit a rate limit and you'd be cut off. So how we go about doing this is we want to right click on the module and we want to add an error handler, and we're going to drag it down here. Now the error handler is different. Oops, let me do that again. The only real one you're going to use here is break or ignore. I've never used commit, resume, commit or rollback. This is if you have a custom database. I'm just going to skip over it because for 99.99% of people watching this, it's not applicable. Ignore just means, hey, if you come into an error, just ignore and stop the execution properly. Don't continue this particular instance or a particular run. So if this workflow were to trigger once a day, you encounter an error, it's just going to safely shut it off. Nothing's going to happen. If you click resume, you're just going to ignore that warning, and then it's going to go to the next instance and try and complete the scenario. What I use in the vast majority is break. What break does is it's going to wait for 15 minutes, and then it's going to try up to 3 times. So wait 15 minutes, try once, wait 15 minutes, try twice, wait 15 minutes and try a 3rd time. And at that point in time, if it doesn't work, it's going to ignore it and safely shut it off. If you don't add an error handler in here and it does end up throwing an error, your whole scenario is going to turn off. And obviously you probably don't want your scenarios to turn off. So that's essentially how error handling works in make.com. There's just one thing here is you'll see this one here. This needs to, you need to enable storing of incomplete executions. So you can click that red box, check off allow storing of incomplete executions, click OK. And you also should be able to get this from the scenario settings down here. What this means is that by default, make.com doesn't actually save your data. So once the run is completed, it deletes it. But with this, it allows you to save that to rerun it 15 minutes later, 3 times, right? So it'll go 3 runs over the course of 15 minutes. What we can do as well here is we can clone this module by right-clicking and clicking clone, and then dragging this into the loop here. It's going to essentially throw this in between these two. So it's going to hit this Slack module first, and then after it's going to go to the break. What we're doing here is I just want to send a message to myself being like, an error has occurred in the test scenario number 2 workflow in make.com. And then we can pass in the type and the message, and we'll just pass in the type here and the message, so that if this were to break, we can just message ourselves, hey, you know, this is broken. You should probably take a look at this. Okay, sweet. So that's error handling. Now we're kind of just wrapping up this module here. Just one last thing that I want to point out is that when I handle databases and data structures and all that kind of stuff, I just use Google Sheets. Like I use Google Sheets to store all of my information. So I'll create tabs here. I'll update tabs. I will search tabs. I'll delete tabs. Anytime I'm using information across workflows and I need to grab information or store it or update it or delete it or whatever, I always use Google Sheets. This is my go-to. It's absolutely free to use. And yeah, it's just a really easy way. You have so many different things in the Google Sheets module that you can do. So overall, anytime I store data, I use this, and I'd highly recommend it as well. Now, we're actually almost done. What I want to do is I want to talk about one final thing here, which is super important, and that is HTTP requests and webhook requests, which is the 3rd module here that we're going to build out. Now, the thing is in make.com is that like, it's great because you can add in maybe 2,000 at the time of this recording. They have 2,000 native integrations. So coming into make.com, these are what the native integrations are. You can scroll down. They have Zoho CRM, MailChimp, Typeform, Calendly, Breville, Line, all of these. But what about the tens of thousands of applications that they don't have, right? Well, that sucks. Like obviously you want to use that. The thing is you still can't use that. And in webhooks and HTTP modules, that's how you can have a 2-way sync of communication back and forth between these applications. So you can let's dive into what that looks like. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to create my 3rd scenario here. We're going to create another scenario, and this is going to be a test scenario number 3, right? So we're going to add this massive button, and it's going to be a webhook. And we're going to use something called a custom webhook. Now, this might seem a bit scary, but we'll walk through this together. We can create a webhook here, and you can title this whatever you want. So I'm just going to do lead form here. And essentially, there's a couple things about this. It's going to generate this URL here. Let's copy this URL and paste it into a new tab. Let me walk through how this works. You have 2 parts to this webhook. Okay, this is the first part is like the root domain. You have a subdomain hook.us2.make.com. And this is just saying, hey, we're going to send it to make.com. And this unique ID is specific to your account. It's specific to this particular webhook. Anytime you send data to this webhook, okay, it will appear in this workflow and you can use this data. If you want to get super meta about it, pretty much all of these modules is like a webhook. It's just that it's a native integration. So this is how you can connect all of these different applications into make.com without having a native integration. So this is super powerful stuff. So let's go ahead and give you an example. So let's go and sign up for a Jotform account here. Okay, this is just another way to create a form. I don't use Jotform for my forms. I also do use Google Forms. I use like Elementor or Go High Level. But just for the purposes of this, let's go ahead and let's try this out. So I'm going to create an account here with Jotform, and we're going to sign in. This is also free, by the way, to do, and you don't have to pay anything, at least for this test demo. We're going to create a form here. So I'm going to go to My Forms, and we're going to create a form up top here. And I'm going to give my organizational ID, and here's just whatever, and finish. We're going to start from scratch, create a classic form here. Okay, really basic. I just want 2 things. We'll X off this, add elements up here. We'll type in full name and we'll type in email. And that's essentially it. We can do, yeah, we'll just start with there. It's super basic. I'm not going into Jotform. This tutorial is not about Jotform. But in the settings tab here, you can go into integrations, and in the integrations, you have something called a webhook. Now, most form builders are going to have this, but the reality is most applications in general have webhooks. So if you can't find a native integration into make.com, you should be able to send webhooks from pretty much anything. I send it from my CRM, I send it from forms, I send it from multiple different applications. This is like standard today in 2024 to have this kind of functionality. So we can click webhooks here, and then we add a webhook. So we're going to come back into our scenario, and we're going to copy this, and then we're going to paste this in the webhook here, and we're going to complete the integration and set this up. Now what I want to do is preview this form, okay? And I want to do a test run. So we're going to come back to make.com, click OK, and we'll run this module. It's now waiting for data. It's listening to any responses that are being sent to it. And because we have the webhook in this form, now anytime we submit this, it's going to send to it. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to enter in my name, and I'm just going to do test@gmail.com here, submit. And coming back in here, now we have received the information right within our webhook. And Jotform is just a bit peculiar because all of the data is in this raw request file here. Usually for like, this is actually the only time I've ever seen this. So this is more of an exception than anything else, but usually they'll just send the data like first name equals this, last name equals that. But because we're dealing with JSON here in this format, we have to add one more step, and that is using the JSON module, and we're using parse JSON, and we're going to pass in this particular string here. It's just taking it from like essentially JSON in text format, and then it's putting it into JSON in a format that we can actually read and use in make.com, where we can click things like raw request and put it in here. So we'll click OK, and we're going to run once, and we'll run. We'll set this up, and I'm just going to refresh this page, and we're going to resubmit this data. So test@gmail.com and submit. And now when this runs, it's going to take this raw data here, and it's going to output it so that we now have all this information, like the first name and the last name and the email and all of this kind of stuff. So once again, we took this information here, right? This is what it originally looked like. And then we changed it. So instead of it being like slug equals submit, blah, 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 whatever, now it's like slug equals this submit, right? If we look at the name here, it's like first name, Jono, last name, Catlif. Down here, it's first name, last name. Now we can map this into whatever we want to use it for. Now, that's great. This is how we receive data in make.com from different applications. And by the way, I also, probably the thing I use the most is sending data from my CRM into make.com. So this is Go High Level. This is not a Go High Level tutorial, but I could just essentially, once again, come in here just to give you another perspective. I could add a webhook in here, and I could, once again, add this URL. I could paste that right in here, and anytime somebody's entered into this workflow, it sends data to this webhook, and I receive it here as well. This is something I use all the time. So this is going to be your best friend. You're going to use it very, very frequently. Now, the next thing is what happens if I want to send data from this and have like a two-way integration into something like our CRM, right? So once again, depending on the software platform, and it's hard to generalize here because there's just a million and one things that you could use, but in this instance, an HTTP module is the second part of the puzzle, where webhooks send data into make.com and HTTP requests send data outside of make.com. There's a lot of different applications for HTTP modules, but I'm going to break these down. So let's go ahead and set this up. There's a lot of different things here, but almost every single time I just use the make a request module in the make a request type of HTTP module. And you're going to get lots of different things here. URL, method, headers, query strings, body type. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I saved this for the last for a reason, because this is the most complicated part of make.com. Right now, it's not super complicated, but it will get complicated in the next example. So we have to enter in this information. So what's going on is we're telling the HTTP module, we need to send information to a particular URL. So we can grab a URL like this, for example, an inbound webhook trigger, and we'll just paste this in. The URL, it's going to be a post method. These methods are different. This is coding jargon for telling the HTTP module what kind of request is it. In coding, there's usually 4 standard requests. There's get, which is, hey, I want to receive information. I want to send something to a website like this, and I want to pull it back. Maybe, for example, I request from my CRM the contact information, so I can send an email and look for that client and then pull in like their first name, their last name, and all the rest of the contact information. Posting is what we're doing here. It's a postman. You're delivering something to somebody's front door. You're delivering information. So I want to create a contact. I'm delivering that contact information into the CRM. So for example, and then put is updating, delete is deleting, right? So we're going to post, and we're going to post data to this URL. This is essentially adding a contact into our CRM here. So this is just one simple example, but we could have a body type here, and that body type is form URL encoded. This is just how you format the data fields. This is the easiest way, instead of dealing with like JSON or whatever, where it's going to be complicated. We just want to simplify our lives with form URL encoded. So we can do like first name, and we could do last name. And you don't have to write it like this. You could write it like last name or whatever. It's just, this is usually how I like to do it, is just have like a variable or a key name where there's no spaces. It's just typically in coding, you're not allowed to have spaces, but that's just a practice I carried forward. And then we could literally just pass in this information one more time to our CRM here. So first name equals first name, last name equals last name, and email equals email. And then we're pretty much good. We could run this module, wait for data to come in from this form, and essentially just send it into our CRM, right? So Jono Catlif test@gmail.com. We're going to submit this. It's going to fire this, parse that, and then send it over to our CRM. Back in our CRM, if we just load up the response that we just got here, you can see the name, first name, last name, email, and then in something like Go High Level, I'm going to go over this really quickly because this is not a Go High Level tutorial, but you could essentially send a text message to the person being like, hey, Jono, it's whatever from ABC company. Thanks for inquiring. It would be great to chat. And this is how you can get that 60-second response time, by the way. So in this first scenario here that we built out together, you could just add somebody into Go High Level here. For example, they have their own built-in module, but you can also send them straight into this workflow builder here as well. So anyways, that's how you could get really fast response times. So that's essentially how HTTP modules work. I'm gonna leave you guys today with one last HTTP module here so that you fully understand. So of course, with HTTP modules, we can send that data into something like our CRM, right? But another use case for it doesn't necessarily mean like, hey, the workflow's done, we send information to a location. We could query some external resource and then gather information. So similarly with Webhooks, where Make.com only has like 2,000 native integrations, but there's tens of thousands of applications you can connect in with Webhooks. Also, like think about the webhook is like the trigger, right? But similarly, all these same applications have their own APIs or documentation that you can connect into. It just so happens that they don't have a connection natively for Make.com, but they still have connections. We can still access those connections. We just can't do it natively through Make.com, but we can do it through an HTTP module. And an HTTP module, the way I would think about it is that it's essentially like a one-to-one substitute for any of these native things. Instead of just having like an easy way in with a native integration for like something like Google Sheets or ClickUp or Slack or whatever, you're just building your own. It's like a DIY starter kit. Like, let's go ahead and do it ourselves. Now, I usually don't do it this way. It's pretty rare, but I only do this for applications that don't have a built-in native functionality with Make.com, but they still have an API documentation. So what the hell does that even mean? What does API documentation even mean? All of that kind of stuff. Let's kind of dissect this together. So following our example with lead generation and like capturing leads, what we could do is maybe you have a use case where you're like, hey, I want to verify the phone numbers. I want to make sure when we get a lead in, it's not a fake number. I want to only contact people that are real numbers. And if they're not a real number, well, then we're just going to go ahead and we're going to disqualify or reject this person, right? So what we could do is we could use something called numverify.com. I just found this actually today for this particular video, but this is something that you could easily do. And this is more just like to give you an overall perspective on how this kind of works. So we're going to come to this numverify.com. This is going to verify if a number exists or not. So we're going to sign in and we're going to use just our email address here. And we're going to create an account. Okay. Sorry, we have to create an account and we're going to choose the free option here. And once you sign up for this free option, you'll be inside. Now, I'm just gonna, since I've already signed up for this, I'm just gonna use mine. You could use this API key if you wanted to, because I'm never gonna use this again. But essentially, we need to verify numbers. Now, we're gonna have an HTTP module. We're gonna right click on these three dots and add a module. And this is gonna be an HTTP module. And we're going to very similarly make a request, okay? And this gives us the whole building blocks to how we do this. Now, with software, right, they have documentation and it's a step-by-step process on how to implement this in. If you ever get stuck, I just go to ChatGPT and I say, hey, how do you make an HTTP module in Make.com for this? Here's the documentation. This is, and I'll literally like copy this whole page and I'll be like, this is the documentation here. How do I make this work? And it'll be like, you do this, 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 and this, right? But that's if you get stuck. But in this instance, there's building blocks to HTTP requests. So the first thing is the URL. So we need to add in a URL here, and it gives us the URL, which is this. This is an API endpoint. An API stands for Application Programming Interface. It's like a catch-all word essentially for just, allowing you to send data and retrieve data from certain things. You can send a response you can send a request and you can get a response back. So the request that I'm asking for is, hey, can you validate this? And the response is no, that's not a valid number, or yes, that is a valid number. So you request and then it delivers something back to you, right? I like to think of it like a kitchen where, you have essentially, your server, and you have your server that like gives you the food, and that person will go back to the kitchen and essentially cook up your order and then return it back to you. So anyways, we have this URL here. We're going to paste in this URL function. This is a get method because we're not sending data to it. We're just adding into the query parameter additional information here. So we're going to switch this back to a get. It hasn't specified that it's a post, and I'm just going to default it to get. In this case, because it doesn't say which one it is, we could try both and just see what works. Now you have additional information here, right? Now with this, think about it as JSON data. You have key value pairs. You have access key, which is your unique authentication. This authenticates you with this program saying, hey, I am who I am. I'm Jono Catliff. I registered with you. This is my registration code. This is like my password. And then we can pass in the phone number that we want to verify. And then we can pass in the country code like US for United States. And then the format, the country code format, which is like a +1 for Canada in the United States. And we could do this, like this is query parameters. So we could do this like straight in the query parameter up here, which is like, essentially copying and pasting this in and just doing it like this, like they're suggesting. But one easier way to do this is actually just deleting this and adding in the query strings here. This is going to fill out these query strings for us. So the first thing is we just got to copy access key, paste it in there. We can paste in this key in here. We'll add another query string in here, the number, and we're going to paste in this for now, and then we'll change this. Lastly, we'll add in two more, which is the country code. And this could be like US, for example, and then the format is going to be +1 because this is a US phone number, or let's say you're servicing clients in the United States, it's that, right? So we have this number. This would essentially be a dynamic field. So we'd really actually want to pass in the particular phone number field, which we didn't fill or a request on this form. So you just make sure you have this on your form, but I'm going to paste in this dummy phone number for now, and we're just going to click OK, and we're going to run this, right? And we can see that the data is here. One thing we forgot to do is we just want to parse the response so that instead of it being like what we saw with that webhook from the job form where it's just text, we want it to be real data that we can work with. So we're going to run this one more time. And we have the data down here. And it's saying this is a valid phone number, right? Here's the phone number, local format, international format, all of that kind of stuff. This is a real number. Now, if I was to go in here and just type in a random number, like somebody just, threw a burner number on there, and we look at data, it says valid number is false. So now we could just essentially say, hey, this is essentially a false person that's contacting us. And then in this form, all we'd have to do is come down into this reject button, and we just add another conditional statement in here. So in general functions with this setting icon, we can click or and add another conditional statement. So what the or operator means is that either one of these has to be true for this to be false. So either this, not an or, we're doing an and. So two conditions need to be met. First of all, in order for them not to be rejected, they have to have a budget over $1,000 plus, and they also have to have a phone number in here that is valid, right? So we're going to say, and data valid equals true, right? So if either one of those are wrong or both of them are wrong, they're going to be rejected immediately. You can go in and update the contact fields here as well, and or the rejected field here as well, and click save, and we're done, right? And that is how you can have HTTP requests. Now, the reason I brought this up is just because we're not just sending data somewhere with HTTP requests. We're essentially requesting data, we're receiving it back, and then we're using that in the rest of our workflow, just like any other module. It's just that this doesn't have a built-in native integration in make.com, but we can still access it through the HTTP module. And that is essentially it. Whew, that's it. Hopefully you guys found incredible value with this crash course on make.com. Once again, you could go to the make.com Academy. It's going to walk through pretty much everything that we just talked about in this particular video from A to Z. All these functions I use so often, pretty much on a daily basis. This is the building blocks of make.com. Of course, it's great to know, how to connect in certain applications and know, what your favorites are. But ultimately speaking, the real power in make.com lies in your ability to manipulate the data in certain ways by using functions or text parsers or HTTP modules or webhooks, so that you can really be free to create whatever it is you're looking to build. At the end of the day, pretty much everything can be automated. You just need to think big enough and understand how to turn those dreams or visions into reality. And with a course like this, my whole goal is to allow you to really understand at least what you don't know, so that if you do encounter a problem, you can overcome it quickly, or you just don't encounter that problem in the first place. Now, if you guys found value in this, please make sure to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and comment if I missed anything. And also, if you guys want to learn more, I have an entire series on make.com, probably like 50, 60, 70 plus videos at this point in time, going through really complicated scenarios. So I'm sure if you want to use make.com, you check those out. You'll find value in them. And instead of having to reinvent the wheel, you can just watch what I've already built and go into the video, watch me walk through it step by step, download the blueprints, and that's essentially it. It's going to fast track you to find success way quicker with platforms like this. So thanks guys so much. If you made it all the way to this endpoint, I really appreciate you guys spending the time with me today. And I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.